Well, good afternoon, everyone. This is Mike Romali here at the Hurricane Outlook and discussion for October 9th, 2019, recorded around 2 o'clock Eastern Daylight Time. So, a lot to talk about here, or not a lot to talk about here today, rather. We did have, obviously, a couple of very interesting systems that were over the Atlantic. Mainly, these three systems are not of any general concern for tropical development. However, there will be some impacts to portions along the Northeast this weekend with some heavy rain and potentially some flooding concerns, as well as some wind concerns. A big area of low pressure sort of forecast to develop across this region over the next coming days, and this will produce a lot of wind and swell impacts along with some rain impacts for portions of the northeast coast there, so very important there. We've also had a pretty heavy rainfall event here in Florida itself, as there is kind of this tropical disturbance that's kind of scooting on up and kind of out over here, stringing kind of along with this kind of trough and cold front per se, that is creating a general area for showers and thunderstorms to kind of form and train over a lot of areas. There's been a lot of beneficial rainfall here for Florida, leading to some heavy rain, excessive rainfall, causing some flooding concerns, but for the most part, pretty good here in Central Florida. Again, some impacts, of course, to the northeast coast this weekend as sort of this large area of low pressure begins to kind of take place and develop across over here across the Atlantic. We have a couple systems right here, 91L, 92L. Mainly these are of no really concern for any tropical development. We're also going to be watching something here in the Caribbean over the next coming days. We'll kind of touch the base on that here in just a little bit. So taking a look at Invest 91L, this is the tracks. This is from tropicaltidbits.com. This system is generally expected to stay out across the open Atlantic over the next few days. Really no threat to land there. 92L is also really of no threat to land. This is expected to kind of get caught up within that trough and then eventually kind of get kicked out. So maybe doing somewhat of a loop, but for the most part, this should stay well away. But as that kind of does so, this kind of will develop into a large low pressure region and probably non-tropical, and cause some general concerns for the northeast coast there. So very something to kind of keep in mind, but not a lot to talk about there. This is from the Weather Nerd site here. This is on Invest 91 or 92L rather. You can see basically what's going to be going on over the next coming days. This is expected to remain pretty weak and not really produce anything. However, we do see that there is an area of low pressure, but really no convection around it. You can see there is some pretty strong shear that's kind of shearing the system apart. You can generally see that shear cutting across the system, down across like that. So it's kind of forcing any convection to kind of be sheared away from the system. We have some other shear imparting sort of on over here. So you can see southerly shear here and sort of northeasterly shear across here, forcing this any convection with 92L to kind of be sheared and away from the center. So that's kind of why we do not have a classification. However, you notice here on the ASCAT winds, we still have winds near about 34 miles per hour. So this is a still near tropical storm force low on the kind of the southeastern side. Really, that's where most of the strongest winds are, about 25 to 30 knots or so of wind. So this is kind of producing near tropical storm gusts on the southern side, but this is not being classified as a tropical storm because there's almost no convection over the center, which is right about there. When we take a look here at about 91L, again, it is very weak and disorganized, really nothing going on here. Barely have any convection at all. Most of the convection is actually on the southern, mostly on the southern side. You can sort of see some of the center, kind of the remnant center located about there. So usually that's what it's going to do over the next coming days. It's going to drift off that way and eventually kind of kick out over there. So really no threat to land at that point in time. So touching base on any Caribbean threat here over the coming days. So the GFS has kind of been very consistent here. This is the 12Z run forecast hour at about hour 114. So this is out for just a couple hours. This is also from the Weather Nerd site. So you can see here by hour 114, so this is right before kind of the 5-day period, we have something trying to get better organized here. And you can sort of see that little bit of a round kind of kink there. And it's kind of this troughiness kind of going on. We sort of have the turning in the wind barbs. You notice those turning in the wind barbs right here. So this is kind of a pretty sharp, at this point it's a pretty sharp wave axis that is attempting to close off. And then by day 5, by 120 hours, this thing is a very sharp wave. Again, it's not closed off yet, but it is pretty sharp in the wave axis. So you do notice that, and that is a pretty sharp wave axis. And we'll just go out to the 126 hour. Again, that is trying to close off down here, but really not something that is going to be really at this point something that is a little too far out in time. The GFS though has been pretty consistent on developing something in this region. However, again, the other models have not kind of picked up on it. In fact, this is the European model for 120 hours, and this is the GFS for 120 hours. Notice that much in the way of any organization is not there, and really all you have is sort of somewhat of a wave of energy right here, but nothing in the model field out in here at that point in time. Excuse me. So it is important to understand that this is kind of far off in time, and as such, we sort of have a lot of time to kind of watch and wait for this, if anything, to work to get to developing at that point in time. But very sharp contrast between the Euro and the GFS model, with the GFS having something trying to form somewhere in this region, and the European having almost nothing in this region. So right now it is kind of just a watch and wait game, but nothing officially from the Hurricane Center at this point in time. So again, we're watching these two systems that could kind of merge into a tropical low, but at this point in time it looks to be a non-tropical low that will bring heavy rainfall for the northeast coast this weekend. Obviously still some rainfall going on across Florida as well from strung out vorticity from all this mess. So not a lot to talk about today. So I hope you all have a great rest of your day, and I will be back as needed.